All right, well, hello and welcome to session 5. How are you?
Good. Glad to be here.
Yes. So good to see you. Our first question is, what called you to become a playwright? So if you want to sort of slate your name and tell us anything about yourself, and then sort of fold in what called you to become a playwright, if anything.
Fengar, Gael. I think because we're the primary creators of the experience, so that's power, control. And like anyone else in the theater, we are not at the mercy of opportunity. We can write from a prison cell if we have to. And also, we don't have to give up our lives to show up every night. We can have wine with dinner. There's a lot of advantages, and we get the last word too. When things don't go well, we can rewrite the play, and so that's why I prefer being a playwright to an actor. And they're the saints of the theater. I mean, showing up every night and infusing their personalities into our characters. Oh, I admire them.
Oh, that's so good. Vicky, yeah.
So Victoria Z. Daly is the name I write under. Call me Vicky. I would say there's what called me and what called me.
Okay.
Because I grew up with going to theater from the time I was very young. I had the opportunity to, my parents used to bring me to shows in New York. And I always felt drawn to the stage and was in shows when I was a kid. There's history to explain how I ended up becoming a writer, but what keeps me writing is community. That I love the collaborative aspect of playwriting. That even though we're by ourselves in a room creating worlds in our heads and ultimately on a page, that it always comes back to working with other people. And I find that so extraordinarily fun. And the other thing is that I find it's thrilling to be able to have something on your mind that you want to explore, something that feels very personal. The story may not be personal, but what underneath it is very personal. And then to have that presented literally in the flesh, on a stage, in front of other people, to have that energy going back and forth, and then have people respond to it and be moved by it is incredibly moving to me. So that's what keeps calling me.
That makes sense. Yes. How about you, Melinda?
When I was younger, there's a feedback loop going.
Okay, you can hear that too?
Yeah.
Not sure why. Huh. Let me try. Is that better? Okay, I'm gonna let you talk, and I'm gonna hit mute and see if this helps. If you're not talking, let's mute and see if that helps. Okay. So I'll let you go ahead and talk, Melinda. I'm gonna hit mute now.
Okay. So when I was younger, I was a dancer and I did some choreography. And I discovered that I had absolutely nothing to say. I could put beautiful steps together, but they were only steps and they didn't have anything behind them. So I stepped away and I did many other things over the last umpteen years. And a few years ago, when looking at my life, and I was mostly in worlds that were women dominated, I realized that I had a lot of things to say, and that I could write them. I could bring them to life in a way that I could never have done when I was younger. So I started writing, and I just kept going. And my early work, not so great, but I have found topics that really interest me in the lives of the women I've worked with in the past. And I find that incredibly nourishing.
I'm sorry, I lost you at the end. Can you say you find that incredibly
Nourishing. I find it all very, very nourishing.
And I think I muted you at the very top of this. So you were saying you started out as a choreographer?
No, I started as a dancer who did some choreography, and I had nothing I needed to say. I was young, and I could put steps together and I could make a dance, but it wasn't meaningful. It was fine, but not special.
I see.
And playwriting is very special. It's different.
Yeah.
You come to it differently. You're not dependent upon somebody standing there who can do it, can't do it, maybe. It's just, it nourishes my soul.
Wonderful, wonderful. Great. So the next question we wanted to ask is, did you begin in a different medium? Have you always just written plays, or did it start out somewhere else? Yeah, go ahead.
I've always painted, so I was always painting the scenery and making the posters, and so I still do that. But the literary form I most love, obviously, is playwriting. So it's but I love that about theater. It's a fusion of all art forms when you think about it. Everything, painting, poetry, lighting, sound, dance, music. I mean, there it is. It's just great.
Nice. Your work is, your paintings are, they match what you write so well.
That's true.
So Vicki or Melinda, you want to answer that question?
Yeah, I started out, I went to theater school. I went to physical theater school in Paris, and it was so long ago that I think the phrase devised theater didn't exist, but that's what we were doing in part. We always had assignments to work with other people. So I started out as an actor, really a physical actor, or an actor who, you know, came from the physical side of things. And I was writing before I realized that that's what I was doing, because we were kind of writing as a group. So I started from the performance side. And I used to, as I was saying, I used to act when I was a kid, but as an adult, I started from the performance side, and then kind of realized later when I became a writer, a more traditional writer, that I'd actually been doing that already.
Yeah. That's amazing. How about you, Melinda?
My first writing 10 years ago, 12 years ago, was a children's book, which I spent two or 3 years writing. I was then told it wasn't very good, and that was okay. But it started me off on a habit of writing every single day. And it's a habit that I maintain now. So it didn't start as a playwright, started as what I thought would be a book writing career, as a, you know, a late in life career. And I find that playwriting is just so much better.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Okay, so tell us about your monologue. Who wants to go first? Melinda, you want to keep talking?
Sure. Good. My monologue started by listening to an NPR interview with Allison Janney. She, the actor, she was being interviewed this summer of 2020 when COVID was in full force. And what she talked about was going home to her parents and taking care of them. And she described wearing a sweater that she had found in a closet. It was an old, I think it was red, it was a cardigan. And just the way she spoke about being there for her parents, wearing the sweater that maybe she wore when she was a teenager, maybe she didn't, I found that so moving. So it started me thinking about a play that is about a woman, a journalist, and I wrote the part that's going to be in the anthology is the beginning of the play. And I find that putting a monologue at the beginning provides a lot of opportunity to really reveal who the character is, let the character reveal to us vulnerabilities and strengths, and the things that they would never say in front of somebody else.
Yeah.
In a way that you can't, for me, I can't just drop a monologue into a play. If I start there, it gets magic and richness. So that's where my monologue came from. It's all about Allison Janney speaking about her parents and taking on the role of a caregiver. It was very moving.
Wow. Who's next? That's beautiful. Vicki or Fen, you want to talk?
All right. My monologue, Bats, Scat, Fever, I began it when COVID started. Remember, everybody thought the bats and the Wuhan wet market in China, they eat these bats and they were hanging there and they thought that was the cause of COVID. Of course, they found out later it was the raccoon dog, which I never even knew existed, which is quite a cute creature, actually. But you'll love it, like you'll like that very much if you look it up, Deborah. And anyway, I did some research on bats, and I have to say, every bit of research I've ever done on any animal, I wind up respecting them. And bats are just amazing, and we need them to eat the mosquitoes and to provide fertilizer, and so they're not really creepy. I actually, here's my bat. He's, he visits quite often. I'm getting a little batty myself. Anyway, it was great fun to write and just see come alive with different actors. I like Vicki and probably Melinda. I have a group, and we get to kind of practice our works in progress. Plus, we get to act, and we listen to the feedback, which is usually encouraging and kind. But then again, sometimes, which makes me think of those 3 human compulsions: the compulsion to eat, to have sex, and to rewrite somebody else's play. So true. And anyway, so yeah, Bat, Scat, Fever was. It turned into a full-length play, by the way, too. So, so that's it.
Great, that's great.
Oh, well, I love how already just in our three examples here, how wildly different our plays are. So mine is called Figure Out How to Live. It's a standalone monologue, and it's a very brand new mother talking to her newborn baby girl who has just been born an hour ago. And she's realizing that her entire life has changed because this baby is now real, literally in the flesh, and how ill-equipped she is to deal with it. That she didn't have a wonderful childhood herself, and she's trying to sort through how she's possibly going to be a good mother and talking to the baby about it, while her own mother is waiting in the hallway to come in. And that originated. It's actually I went back. I won't tell you how old I was, but I went back to NYU and got my MFA in 2014, so almost 10 years ago. And this was the very first thing that I wrote in my very first playwriting class. I mean, the origins of it, it's been developed since then, but the impulse for it has always remained the same. And I think what we were asked to do was write about a moment that we felt very passionate about, that was life-changing, I think. Somewhere in there, and that for me was, for myself, it was such a pivotal moment, such a blow-away moment when my child was born, that everything became crystallized. Because you kind of have an idea when you're pregnant, the baby's in there and it's kicking, but when they come out, Oh my God. Everything has just shifted. So that was the inspiration for this one.
Yeah.
And I feel when I write, I feel very strongly about writing about something you feel very strongly about, and that you have questions about,
Yeah.
That's the impetus for all my work, is about big human unanswerable questions.
Yeah. I think
that's in there too.
What's true about the three of you, and I think everyone in this anthology, is definitely their hearts are in it. You can feel it in the text, It's amazing. I love that so much. So now the question is really about your process. This has been an interesting question in past sessions, because for me, sometimes I have to light a candle or whatever, and the doc's like, no candles, just read the news and get mad. So I was wondering, everyone's process is so different. It's really fascinating to me. What's your process, Vicki?
Do you mean process like from the very beginning, or do you mean kind of how do you keep sitting down every day? I mean, is there, because it's different depending on what stage you're in,
right? The conceptual versus the actual. I mean, the conceptual part for me always feels kind of fun and romantic. So I think for me, the question personally is the practical. It's like, how do you get yourself to show up to it every day, as Melinda was saying, that, children's writing sort of taught her, show up how do you get to that place where you keep going even when it slides back, and the consistency part?
Well, for one thing, I will say I do not do it every day. I go through phases because life, because there's stuff that happens, and so I allow myself now to. I try not to judge myself if I go through a phase where I'm not, but then when I'm back in it, when I'm back in the world, I sit down simply because I find, well, let me step back again. For me, all my writing is always about trying to sort out a question that I have about humans, which very often is because I don't understand human beings. I fully admit this, which gives me plenty of material. I will never end. Because I don't really understand why people treat each other the way they do. I don't understand why they hurt each other, and hurt each other in the ways that they do, in the big ways that they do. So there's always an angle on that can inspire me to write something. And so that's always there underneath. What you were saying about writing from the heart, I think that's really true. If you go in with your heart every day, you'll find something. And then also, I'm really endlessly fascinated by craft. And I'm a script consultant. And so I just find the whole process endlessly fascinating. I love helping other people too with what their questions are and what their craft is. And I try to do that for myself. So every time I sit down, I'm actually looking forward to solving problems, because that's really what playwriting is. It's once you have an overall idea, it's really problem solving. And then I have and because I have a writers group that meets weekly, this is another thing. So this is a practical thing. I have things to check off. So we're I'm telling you about kind of going from big picture to small picture, like the granular stuff. But the granular stuff is that I have assignments for myself, because if I brought something in to my group and I have a set of notes, then I can just go back and highlight each note and work on that as kind of an assignment every time I sit down. So that really helps me keep going. And if I didn't have that, I would have I can give myself assignments. I do that, for other people, but I think it's always really helpful to have an outside point of view telling you what they received and what they didn't receive, and to focus on that. So that really helps ground me, to have that set of points that I can kind of check off. when I sit down again. And then those points can inspire me to come up with things that I didn't expect to before. So it's a constant process of discovery.
Yes, that makes sense. And Melinda, you were saying you show up every day from your children's book experience?
Yes. There are days when I don't show up, and it's mostly when I'm starting to write something and I don't know what I want to spend the next 2, 3 months, 4 months writing. And then I go for very long walks and I think about it and I listen really carefully on the subway and on the bus, and I try to hear somebody else. And if I am lucky, and a lot of this is luck, I hear something that will work and that will nourish me and keep me interested for the next few months. And then there are times when I'll do 2 pages and realize that there's nothing there, but that was what I got done that day and I put it aside. I never throw it away. Each day I start with a new date and I go forward, or I scratch it, what I did the day before, but I never toss it out, because sometimes later on something comes back that was, not quite a footnote, but an aside, or as a look of something. But I try, it doesn't always work, but I try to write every day, and it's not always the same time of the day. Sometimes I really need to take a walk in the park, clear my head of all the aggravations of the day, and then something will, on a lucky day, will come to me, something, the dog, or this or that. Somebody said something, or the sunlight is a little different, or there'll be an eagle outside. We have an eagle that is living in the park outside, and that will push me in a direction that maybe I wasn't expecting to go in, and maybe it's a dead end, but it is something to consider. So, some days I only work for 15 minutes, and some days I work, it feels like all day, because there's something else going on that feels interesting.
Fascinating. How about you, Fen? Does it ever start with a visual with you? What is your process like when you write a play?
Well, yes, it does. But my process, I believe, for me, the morning is a sacred time. And I have a lot of peace and quiet here in Irvine, boring Irvine. And I have the companionship of a cup of coffee. And I just start, I lay supine on the sofa. I actually do my first drafts on this thing called a boomboard, write by hand.
Oh,
and
wow.
I loved reading. They did a study in Florida, and it turns out the tactility of paper increases concentration and retention. Yay. And so that's it. I sit there and I'm left alone, and hours go by, and then I go swimming. And sometimes I swim before I write, but it's part of my daily routine. And it's yeah, I seem to need the drug though. Coffee really helps me. It's just, and it's just I like it. It's so much. I love being alone. I was just Jerry and myself here, and I'm left alone, and and it's unbelievably quiet here in Irvine. It's just the occasional bird. So and I need absolute silence. I know some people write with music and all kinds of things going on. I just seem to require complete and utter silence. So that's it.
Nice. And we maybe already touched on this, but why did you choose your subject or your theme?
I can answer. I have a ghoulish fascination for all things medical and kind of creepy, and the horror genre. I love the horror genre by accident. But yeah, when COVID came, remember the first victims of COVID in New York City? Oh my God, it was just so creepy, and they thought it was from bats, and people were having horrible symptoms before the vaccination came out. Anyway, naturally I leapt on the idea of COVID and where it could have come from and what it did to people. And of course, here in crazy California, we have a lot of anti-vaxxers, and Yeah, I live in a neighborhood. It's, I have a lot of right wing to the, to the right of Mussolini Republicans here. It's very interesting because New York is, it's so liberal and democratic kind of. It's been a great adventure. Anyway, that's it.
How about you, Vicki? Do you want to talk about why you chose the moment of birth?
Well, as I think I was saying before, that for me that was a pivotal moment, a massive like earthquake, tectonic shift kind of moment for me, and it's not necessarily about me, but the play is not me, but what always interests me is honing in on a moment of change as a dramatic subject.
Yeah.
Like, and especially in a monologue, because you start, well, in this case, the change has happened right before the character starts, but there's also a change over the course of the monologue. And I'm always interested in how characters shift and what's a really big thing that they're grappling with that is too much for them.
Right.
Feels like too much for them in that moment. And then what do they do to deal with it? I mean, I love throwing characters into really difficult situations. And I think there's hardly anything bigger than suddenly having a human being in your arms who you're not prepared for.
Yeah.
And that's a responsibility that you're going to have for the next 18 years.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, just coincidentally, my daughter just had her first child, and so I just got to meet our granddaughter.
Wow.
And I thought, how interesting that this play of mine has now come back kind of into the universe. It's going to be published in your anthology, and I got to read it through again and say it's still, and holding my grandchild, my very first grandchild in my arms recently, and thinking, boy, I still feel vulnerable. Right? I've been through the whole cycle already, but I'm telling you, a newborn baby, they are really big to have just come out of somebody's body, but they are really small to be human beings.
Yes.
Yes. So that's kind of to me, that's a bit of an everlasting theme.
Yes.
Yeah.
And how about you, Melinda? Was yours inspired by the eagle or a bus? Or I'm interested to know what got you writing about this.
It had to do with COVID. It had to do with the interview with Alice and Janet. And in the main part of the play, the main character is a journalist, Catherine, and she is focused and strong, and nobody would ever see her weaken. I mean, she's a journalist. This is what she does. She delves deeply. But the monologue, we all lived through COVID. It was crazy. In the monologue, she has developed routines that help her. She walks around the apartment. She touches everything. She touches her bag. Does she have her Tampax? Does she have extra panties? Does she have her passport handy? It's her valise, if she's sent somewhere. Does she have a charger for her iPad? So she walks around and she touches everything, and then she does it again. And it's the things that we take for granted, that if we need to pick up our bag and grab a charger, we're going to do it. But during COVID, nothing was obvious and nothing was guaranteed. This is how she calms herself. And at the end of the monologue, she reveals that maybe this isn't the life that she would have totally chosen. She reveals a certain jealousy of her colleagues who have children, who have a partner, who have somebody there at night. And who does she have? She has her bag and her other bag and her, making sure that, all of her insurance papers, that she has a thumb drive with pictures of her family, that everything she would need if she was stuck somewhere, as we were all stuck someplace, that it's all there.
Right.
So I think it comes from everything that we all did, to make sure that we had whatever it is, and, the extra jars of peanut butter or the extra toilet paper. We didn't buy 2 rolls, we bought 30 rolls just in case.
Right. Right. Well, this next question is, what has your experience been regarding play development? And I think it rolls into the last question, which is, have small companies like Venus been a service to you along the way? That's sort of like parts of the same question. So do you want to speak to that?
Well, I have a question for you. So when you say what's been your experience with play development, do you mean once the play is out in the world, or do you mean how we develop our work before we send it out, or
once it's out in the world, I think is what I mean. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'll say I absolutely love, that's kind of the best part. Well, one of the best parts is when you get to work with other theater artists. Going back to what I was saying about, what keeps me doing this, because it can actually be painful. It's just like any relationship. It can be painful if the chemistry isn't right, or it can be unbelievably satisfying, because if you have a director who really gets your work and really adds to your own vision of it, that it's such a delight to, or the actors, same thing, where they bring ideas, they bring inspiration. And so that's a part that I absolutely love. And it's a little bit like lightning striking, because it's not a guarantee when you're working with any particular group that will happen.
Right.
But when it does, oh my gosh, it's such a joy. And then people, so that's, and that's, if you're in the position where you can rewrite and develop as you're in production, then, or even, that's wonderful, but also you can rewrite after the production because you've learned so much from that particular production. So that's often happened with me. I'll take aspects that were, basically gifted to me through the directors and the actors, and then go back and also, part of the thing is seeing your work on stage. You'll find places that didn't work that you thought worked, and that weren't guaranteed. So I'll go back and address that. And then there are places where I can enhance, because, as I say, I have the gift of a wonderful director and a wonderful writer. And I think wonderful actors, what I meant to say. You asked also, I think, about small companies. And I would say, for me, it all happens through small companies. All of those experiences that I've just talked about, have happened through, and small companies all over the world. For me, I've had great experiences working with people in Dubai and in Scotland, and in lots of places in the United States. So I'm so grateful for those small companies. I've even had one, in Dubai, there's the people who worked on one of my plays, which won a festival there, ended up becoming a small company because they clicked over the experience of working on my play, and now I've worked on other things with them. So it's been this kind of wonderful loop.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's amazing, right? They named themselves after this particular play. They named their company after the play.
That's wonderful.
And those are these, like I said, these incredible gifts.
Yeah.
That you have no control over, and just are kind of kismet.
Yes. That's
Going
sweet.
back to what keeps you going, you know?
Yeah, it's those synapses start firing all together. It's amazing. I think for me, running Venus, as much as I like to have playwrights come, I just sort of subscribe to the school that it takes 3 full productions for a play to know what it is. And so as a producer, I'm always trying to stage it as it's written so that the writer can have that experience of this is where it is now. And I always feel like the writer really knows best once they see it, what to go back in and do. And I also think it's this journey out of analog into digital. As difficult as it is, I think I remember I had a submission from Kosovo, and I was just like, how is this happening? How am I producing women all over the world? When I started, it was just note cards and binders, and now everything is so expansive and open. It's incredible. Yeah.
It is amazing because like I might be doing rehearsals on Zoom in some place that's got a 9-hour or 12-hour. I mean, I done them in Australia.
Yep, same. Yeah.
Yeah.
We had a playwright from Australia, and she finally got here, and excuse my language, she was like, how is it still fucking Thursday? It's the first the time. It was hilarious. Anyway, yes. Anybody else want to speak to that?
I just think companies like Venus are great. A great, good blessing to my life that you were brave enough to do my horse racing play, Devil Dog 6, in which 6 actors had to be horses. And I received some really cruel letters from literary managers
Really?
of major theaters. Oh, yeah. They thought that the actors, you know, that they didn't credit actors to have the chops to be another species, and never mind that the audience would go along for the ride, which they did. Oh. They do, you know, you can convince them that an actor's a horse. I just, anyway, you also did my Gift of Forgotten Tongues, and that was a great adventure too. And there you are in Laurel, Maryland, horse racing country, and it was just a treat. Bless you for your theater, and I love the name. Venus.
Thank you. I didn't mean to fish for a compliment here, though. Oops, wait, where'd you go? Are you there? Yeah.
Well, you're getting one anyway, because I'm really grateful to theaters like yours. I really am. So.
It really was fun to go to the racetrack, and because I can't go to the racetrack, I couldn't even make a $5 bet because I just can't. But to watch them exercise the horses in the morning and like really get into it and meet a jockey and like all of that. There was one exerciser who would just sing to the horse Motown songs. Like, yeah, you just sing. The horse would just run harder and harder. It was an amazing experience. Thank you for writing it.
Oh, I know. I go to the track a lot. The guy I live with, his vocation, true vocation, is handicapping horses. He squandered a lot of money on horses, and so have I, actually. But it is another world. It really is. And here in California, we have 2 great racetracks, Del Mar and Santa Anita. Yeah. And so we go quite often. Of course, now with the internet and, you know, betting on the internet and watching everything, we don't go as often. I miss it. So
it's a different world for sure. How about you, Melinda? What's your development been like?
I found, okay, I have to be honest, when I started and people kept saying you have to rewrite, it didn't feel right. I didn't understand what they were talking about. And sometimes they were right. And sometimes it was a game, and which was not fun. I mean, it was like, I'm in a position to tell you what you have to do. Like, okay. And then I met a couple of directors who wanted to develop my plays. And I found the experience so, you know, I know I used the word before, but nourishing, you know, of sitting down and really talking about where it comes from and why it's there and what does this really mean? And did you mean to say that? And if I said yes, they respected that. And if I said, well, I wasn't sure, they respected that also and helped me find a better way. And that made all the difference in my playwriting, of having somebody who was not playing a game, who was non-judgmental and believed in the play and believed in me that I could take it to another step. And that was remarkable. And on one of the first times that happened, I actually got a check in the mail afterwards. And I went, this is my $10 at work, you know, from the New York State Council on the Arts. And I thought, whoa. And the people were focused and kind, but very smart. And it really turned me around as far as accepting conversation and advice from people.
I'm so glad you had that experience. I never understand why artistic directors or literary managers choose plays they don't think play in the first place. That never makes sense to me. Like, I would never choose a play if I didn't think it would play, you know? So I've heard from other playwrights exactly what you're saying, that it's more an authoritarian kind of, I think one woman said it's as if they treat it like it's their raw material, and now they can just cut it up into pieces. And I'm not sure why. I think without trust and respect, you know, it's not, as Vicky was saying, it can be not a great experience, or it can be an incredible experience. It's all about the relationships and the dynamics. I'm so glad you didn't give up.
Thank you.
What I was going to say is it takes being, well, okay. So the Dramatists Guild Bill of Rights, one of the things is, you know, a playwright has the right to be in rehearsals, to be involved with casting. So, you know, we're all those things. But a lot of theaters, to my constant chagrin, don't respect that or know about it.
No.
You know, if you talk about small theaters,
yeah,
I think it's, and so what it requires is being invited into the room.
Mm-hmm.
And what I always try to do when I'm invited into the room is say, I'm going to be there to listen. I want to reassure the director that I'm not going to step on their toes, that I'm not going to interrupt, that I'm not going to be spoken to, I'm not going to speak unless I'm asked to, or, you know, I'll speak to the director
directly.
You know, I won't talk to the actors unless the director asks me to.
Yeah.
And as long as we're all on the same page about kind of what the rules are, then we can have a great time together.
Right.
And I love it when the director, I mean, to me, it makes sense that a director will say, you know what, we've got the person who wrote the play, so let's find out what the intention was, and you know, and have a collaboration. The experiences that have not been good is where I'm not invited in, right? And so I just am left with the after the fact. And I think so. That's one of the ways. That's the main way, really. You know, where people say, "No, we're not. You're not invited to rehearsal. You're not." You know, because it's difficult to make something bigger when everybody isn't. When we're not being allowed to all be part of the creative space. I guess is what I'm saying. So I'm very grateful to the directors and theaters who kind of understand that being open is creating an open, safe space is actually really good for everybody.
Yes. Yes.
But it's not a given.
No.
Right. To flip that around from my side, I have had, I'll just say, one playwright. It's just really been out of 100, just one playwright who would call me on the phone from another time zone right when the rehearsal was starting, and I would ask, can you please call me at another time? And she would say no, and she would take up the first 15 to 30 minutes of my rehearsal just talking to me on the phone while I was staring at my actors, and it was just not a trusting relationship. So that made me understand like why it may feel guarded sometimes, because sometimes playwrights don't know that you don't give notes to actors. Like you can watch and you can talk to so I think it is about boundaries and parameters. And I think the Dramatists Guild has been essential. I mean, we adopted that contract a long time ago, like right when we heard about it. And it's just simple stuff. So I'm not sure why more people don't use it or know about it, because I think it sets good boundaries so that everybody can be present. And I know for me as a director, like it's good to have the playwright at the first read sometimes. But then for me, I tend to say, just go away for 2 weeks and then come back for the second read, because you don't want to watch this. Like you don't want to watch us flop around and find it and own it on our own. So then we can show it to you. So we're not sort of just trying to imitate what you're telling us. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. And that's usually how the best processes for me work. Like I'll come in early on, people have questions, whatever, and I can, if they have questions for me, I can say this was my intention.
Yeah.
Or this is what I think the backstory is on this character, or whatever it is that they're asking about, and then leave the director and the actors to experiment.
Yes.
And fall down and have failures and all that kind of stuff without me being there to make anybody feel self-conscious.
Right.
And of course, my goal is never to make anybody feel self-conscious, because I just want to be a support. But I understand that can happen. So
like, presence is powerful. We feel your presence. Yeah. And we respect it. Yeah.
One of my favorite times of being a playwright is the first read through. And, and of course they say, I guess it was Hal Prince, 90% of directing is casting.
Absolutely.
And in this age of identity politics, though, it's kind of hard to be a playwright. Someone say, how dare you appropriate a culture? And I just want to say, do you want me to always write plays about scrawny white women, please? It's such a hard time. And I just had this experience of a play in Santa Ana, California. And the director cast totally different races, genders, everything. Just thought that was the cool thing to do. It changed the play radically. And I kept my big mouth shut. But I have to say, took huge liberties. And it was a tough experience. I wanted more power, and I knew I couldn't have it. It's just, you have to, that AA phrase, let go and let God. That is, sometimes you say it's too late. They're just, but I don't know.
Did the director ask you about?
No. And the thing is, and Vicki, the thing is, he's from Burma. He's Asian. He has trouble with English a little bit. And so, there was this cultural thing as well as, it just, he was a nice guy, and I know he served his idea of the play. He did not consult me in any way, or to him the play was just a roadmap to do whatever he wanted, to go where he wanted, and so I let it go, and it turned out okay, but not great, and it just was what it was.
I remember taking a hit in the press from a critic because we did Daria Marinelli's We Are Samurai, and she is half samurai. And it's a play about reincarnation. I said, Daria, there's no one of Asian descent that I can cast. Like, one person auditioned and they're not available. Are you okay with me casting this, like, basically with all white people? And she said, of course, it's a play about reincarnation. It has nothing to do with that. And I said, okay, I had her permission. So I went ahead and did it. Yeah. And even then the press was like, I'm not going to tell you not to go see it, but it seems, and I was just like, wow, you didn't even ask me. Like I talked to her about it, and then,
if you believe in primacy of imagination, then you shouldn't be stuck on the creatureliness of people and actor. Go with the best actor. But we can't do that anymore. Oh no, it's
when I did Soft Revolution, it was very difficult to cast because I needed 2 Middle Eastern women, and me, I'm like, I just fall in love with the script, let's go. And I lost a week of rehearsal because I was still trying to cast it. And when I finally cast it after the first week, Trump was elected. The whole play is about this tension over the hijab. And I said, you know, it's just about a piece of fabric. And then Trump was elected, and all these tweets were like, if we see a woman wearing a headcloth, we're going to set her on fire. And it was so terrifying. And years after the production, I remember talking to one of those actors, and I said, I don't know if I was supposed to do that. That wasn't my culture. I don't know if I should have, if I should have done. And she just said, where I come from, there's not a lot of theater. No one would ever write that script. So if you and the playwright hadn't done it, the story would not have been told. So I think it's
great.
Tricky.
Bravo.
I mean, you want to open everything up to diversity. Absolutely. Absolutely. And yes, there are very talented people that deserve a shot that have been excluded for far too long. Absolutely. But I think there's so many moving pieces and variables that, you know, once you leap with that production, it's going to go and become what it is. And we try, but I think especially small companies, we just don't have the budget to fly somebody in, or, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. Anything else you want to talk about?
I'd like to talk about gender.
Oh yeah, let's do it.
I had a discussion recently about a play that I wrote. It's called Miss October, and it's about 2 unfertilized eggs which become fertilized, and we take them through the 9 months to birth. And it was a Zoom conversation, and so I got to read all of the comments in real time. And in my head, and these 2 developing personalities, because there was no other word to use for them as they start developing, they choose not to know about sex. If they don't want to look at their what they calling their plumbing, and they talk all the time, and they do a little Shakespeare and whatever in utero. Who are we to know if that happens or doesn't happen? I mean, none of us remembers. But the comments were really interesting. In my head, the eggs were female at the beginning, and the sailors, the visiting sailors, the sperm, are all male. So there were comments about how it was too heterosexual. It was this, it was that. They were flirting. Okay, they had one job, and that was to be fertilized. That was it. You do what you can. I mean, I threw in a few lines from, I don't know, from 1930s films, and it was very funny. But the back and forth that they weren't genderless enough, that they sounded to this or to that. Meanwhile, every time we had done it in workshop, a guy had played one character and a woman had played the other, and they suited my needs. But the whole question of gender became, I don't want to say silly, but in some ways it was very silly. Like, this is a play. It does not have to reflect your life or my life or the reality in the newspapers or harassment or anything. It's a play. It comes out of my imagination. It is not based upon anything but, something I thought was really quite fun. But the issue of the gender and who could play these developing personalities who don't know if they're male or female and don't care. They don't care. One of them is going to be a Broadway diva. And even using the word diva got me into trouble. It shouldn't be diva. It should be something else. Diva refers to female.
Well, wait. Let me ask you. So who was making these comments about it's too much this or it's not enough that? Where were those comments coming from?
They were coming from people who were on this Zoom conversation. It was put together by a theater who I respect, and I had watched other ones, and they had very interesting comments, and I thought I could get into some trouble, but I didn't expect this trouble. I expected different trouble.
Well, so the people who were commenting, they were commenting on the Zoom. It wasn't in a chat. They were actually part of the conversation?
It was both. Some of them were typed, and some of them were a back and forth, and then there was follow-up, emails that came follow-up, just in case I hadn't quite understood what they were saying. But it was really fascinating. Like, the gender police Like um,
I take to task whoever was running that meeting,
mm-hmm.
because as somebody who runs a writers group and who works with other people on their scripts, it's really important to be, when you're doing feedback, it's really important to be monitoring the types of responses, because you never want to be writing the play for the person. And if your intention was to write voices that sounded a particular way, that's your absolute right. So for people to come in with their opinions about what you should or shouldn't be doing is not welcome. And so whoever was running that, you know, I hope I'm not offending anybody who's watching this who maybe have been running your meeting, but they didn't do their job, because what they should have been doing is protecting you. Because if what you were trying to do was hear how your play landed, that's the job of the audience. That's the job of the people giving, you know, feedback, to say, this is what I heard and this is what I didn't hear, but not to write your play for you. And those people, it sounds like, we're trying to write your play for you.
Yeah.
And that's where I stop it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the job of the people giving feedback is to answer the questions that you as the playwright have.
Thank you.
Agree.
So I would put my arm around you and give you a pat. Like, that was like, it was painful. You know, because you never want people's opinions. They're not supposed to be, you know, it's not their play, it's your play.
Yes. Yes.
Right. And which isn't to say, you know, an opinion like, oh, I loved it, but I mean, it's opinion as, this is how I would write your play for you.
Mm-hmm.
As for gender, it's hard to, I mean, I don't think we can. So this was your original question, was about gender and how, and I think you're asking, like, how do you even exist in this environment right now? Is that what you were asking? I mean,
pretty much. Yes.
I don't know the answer to that. I think you write what you want to write.
Yes, but they've done studies, Vicki and Melinda, and Deborah, where they had stacks of resumes, and both women and men of all ages and genders still chose male WASP names first, male Wisniewski type names, and on the bottom of the pile, women. They are undervalued, underutilized, and still assumed to be less competent than any man in the room. I have a sort of neuter name, Fengar, and sometimes people think I'm Mr. Fengar, you know, and so I get lucky occasionally. But I gotta say, it's still there. Gender, it doesn't help to be a woman. Honest to God, it's just it's
no. And so here's where I want to give a shout out to Deb.
Yeah.
For promoting the voices of women. Women characters, but also here we are, the four of us, and to have created a theater, Venus Theater, and championed women for a long time, longer than anybody else in the United States, if I understand that correctly.
Wow!
As a theater,
yeah.
So I just want to give you a salute. And also I want to say, for those of you, do you all know about, in addressing what you just said, Fengar, about honor roll, the group honor roll? If you don't, you should know about it.
Except you have to be over 50, and frankly, after my research on ageism,
40.
It's
40.
Nevertheless, I did some research on ageism for a play. Nobody in this country should admit to being past puberty, and especially if you're a woman and live on either coast, do not lie. When in doubt, lie. And I'm serious. It's not good. It's not. It's, first of all, it's bad enough being a woman, but I know the honor roll thing.
This is a group. Yeah. It's a group for women playwrights and their advocates who are women playwrights age 40 plus and their advocates. and it's a group, and it's a group that's meant to, it's an activist group. It's the idea is to go out and change this situation in the theater, because we can all, it absolutely exists and we can all complain about it, but the only way to change it is to try and take action and do something. And so that's what the group is about.
Yeah, and also,
and I have no problem admitting that I'm over 40. I think it's really clear from the way I look.
Also, I think we should try to resist definition, period. Resist it. And the best places are ones who don't want your name on the anything about you. They just read it blindly. They judge your play by the merit of the play, period. And, you know, after reading that study about name prejudices, I just thought, God, women, you know, it's just hard enough, but well, all we can do. And speaking of which, how do you feel about being your own self-promoting publicist? I mean, you probably have websites, I don't know, but when you send your plays out to submissions, is that something you do enough of? Do you feel you do it? I mean, I think it's the worst part of being a playwright, but Vicki and Melinda, do you do this every week or something?
No, I go through Spates, and now I have enough things that are published that it makes the opportunities a smaller pool, right? Because there's a lot of theaters that don't want work that's been published before or even produced before, which is a whole other topic.
Yeah,
other topic about wanting first performance rights that then your play has been, you know, it's been kind of ruined for other opportunities and stuff like. So that's a whole other discussion. But so I know there are people who do it every week or whatever. I tend to do it in clumps, and I think there's fewer opportunities than there used to be since before COVID. That's part of it. And I think I'm more selective in what I send out now. I really try to send to opportunities or to theaters where I think that the fit would be particularly good. And I think also the pool, as I say, the pool is shrunk, and part of it is the theaters shrank during COVID. Part of it is that theaters are now more selective, that they found ways to limit what they even want to look at by either saying the first X number of plays that get submitted, you know, we're cutting it off, or we have a theme, or we have a geographical restriction, or something like that, which I think is because theaters, because we were talking about what the internet has opened up, but what it did is it also opened up a deluge of submissions to theaters who couldn't handle that number of scripts being submitted. So they needed to find a way to reduce the pool, which I understand.
And if you know, for women playwrights only, for men playwrights, for African American playwrights only, for playwrights under 30 only, you know, it's sort of.
Yeah. So to answer your question, no, I don't do it every week. And also I have to have enough, you know, and I go through rounds of, okay, maybe I need to write some new things because, as I said, because my plays are whatever it is. So for me, it's quite cyclical, but there are people I know who are very like, this is a habit and I do it. It's hygiene. It's submission hygiene.
It's sort of spiritually draining in a strange way. It sort of sucks the life right out of me. I don't know why. I'd much rather just be writing the play than trying to peddle it to gullible theaters everywhere. Yeah. It's just.
Well, what's much more fun is getting to a point where you know people who just say, "What have you got? Have you got something for me? I'd love to read it." That's ideally where one would like to be all the time. But.
I have one playwright who only submits her plays to me. He said, I don't trust other companies. And I thought, I love your work, but for me, producing in 2019, before COVID even hit, I had actors that I was putting on the stage and giving opportunities telling me that my day was up, my time was up, I had already done this. I should step aside and give younger, more interesting women a chance. Like, just strange things I didn't expect to ever hear from people. And I thought, everything's changing. And sort of speaking to you, Melinda, about like even the vernacular, the change. I don't even know how to have this conversation right now. It's so weird. And as someone who had to recover from trauma and go through PTSD recovery and all of that, as a producer, I had to put trigger warnings on things, which was a whole other thing. It was like, how do I know what your trigger is? Basically, I'm just revealing the whole, everything. I think we're over time now, so I want to be respectful of your time, but definitely felt the big shift. Definitely sat in the studio for 5 years. And it was nice to reach a point where I said, I want to take submissions again, but this time for a publication. So thank you all for submitting and for being a part of it. It's giving me life. It's giving me oxygen. So
you give us oxygen. Bless you, Deborah. Gosh.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yes,
it's been a joy to work with you thus far. Your enthusiasm just radiates off every communication that you send.
Yes.
Oh, I'm glad to hear it. I never know if I'm being too dry, but I'm like, I just want to be clean. I never know how to receive. So thank you for that. Thank you. I was thinking, and I'll get if you have a moment to give me feedback on the last session. I was asking sort of if there's anything else I can do to help you along. I was thinking I could create a Facebook page for Frozen Women Flowing Thoughts, so that if you wanted to, you could go on and talk to each other there. Is that something that you would be interested in? Do you have any opinions on that?
Sure.
Sounds great. I love
lovely.
Facebook. I'm sort of addicted to it. I go every day, and I resisted it.
You did, I remember.
I know, you're the one who got me involved. Thank you.
Sorry,
another addiction.
It was my only connection to the world for a while. I was like, I can only be here.
Oh, you know, one thing though I think playwrights should do, I did it not that long ago, is have a website and put everything on it. So if somebody wants to check out your play, they can download the whole thing. Just, I mean, the nature of ownership in this internet world has changed anyway. Just, have it available by your name. If somebody goes online and writes your name, types your name, that they can find your website and have your plays available. That made a difference for me.
Yeah, I hope this will be a directory. I hope this anthology will be a directory to all of you in some way. All right, we better hop off. It was so great to talk to you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Bye.
All right, we'll see
Thank you.
All right, see you soon. Keep creating.
Yes, you too.
Bye.
Thank you, Deb.